The silence of the left on this issue, though, the absence of anti-war protests, even though we have 70,000 soldiers in Afghanistan, all of a sudden the anti-war left is gone. The media thinks drones are okay. I mean, isn't this something to be bothersome for people who are trying to be honest?
It should be incredibly bothersome, but the problem is who do they turn to? You know, and we saw this at the Democratic National Convention. You walk around the camera and you start interviewing people. You ask them about whether or not they really believe in choice, whether or not they really believe in a whole run of civil liberties, and we even did a video at Reason basically pointing out the lack of consistency, and one woman's like, well, consistency is not important.
Right.
President Obama is important.
She was honest.
She's just straight. She's like, you know what? We're not consistent, but sometimes that's what you need. And it's incredibly partisan. They're going to support the president no matter what. And the problem is Romney does not provide an alternative.
But the argument I heard today was that a lot of these expansions happened under Bush, and so President Obama was simply expanding on those expansions, and so should not be held to the same kind of stand. I mean, even though
the economy is still Bush's fault, but the good things in national security are for President Obama.
Well, and he ran against them. He said he was going to close Gitmo. Gitmo is still open. But Essie, to your point, I think that Mitt Romney should turn to President Obama and say, what is the Obama doctrine in a sentence? Can you explain what that is?
I love it.
Lead from behind? Is it, pick and choose?
He would say, he would say it's nuance. He would say it's sort of a
president says what's yours, then this is not a good moment for the president.
It's tough.
I'm sorry, that does not look good.
We've hit on
the question.
There's the double standard issue here, which I think is as clear as day, and we do have people on the left and on the right saying things that Barack Obama's administration are doing would be considered unacceptable and violations of civil and human rights under Republican. That's one component of this. There's also the issue of the proxies, who's actually running things. Is Hillary Clinton really running foreign policy? We can put those aside for a second, because there's also the issue of what is happening in the world. And today we saw a few things that start to crack this mythology that the Barack Obama administration has been incredibly adept at handling all of these foreign crises. I mean, if Truman lost China, people are starting to say Obama has lost Egypt, including what happened today at the embassy, where they had a riot, and we can see it here. They stormed the U.S. embassy in Cairo. They raised black flags, which are slightly different than the flags you would see for Al-Qaeda, but there's a lot of similarity. The flags say there is no God but God, la ilaha illallah, which is very similar to the Al-Qaeda flag. And these flying, or rather them attempting to fly these after pulling down the American flag, that is sovereign U.S. territory. The U.S. Embassy is treated, and for purposes of international law, is like a little chunk of the United States over there. And this is how it is being treated now in the new Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, which produced the new president of Egypt, who's no longer part of the Muslim Brotherhood, is backing this play in the media. They're saying, look, there was offense through some YouTube videos. That's what this is all about. There was offense on the YouTube videos. The current State Department is saying, yeah, they shouldn't offend people. That's bad. We're against offending people, which seems incredibly weak to me. And that's the kind of weakness that I think people are worried about with Barack Obama. And now you're seeing that play out.
So, Buck, as a political matter, I don't think voters are going to blame President Obama for Egyptians rioting at the U.S. Embassy. I think they will blame the Middle East and the politics of the Middle East, which even when George Bush was president were volatile, difficult tinderbox situation, right? But there is a sense of rudderlessness. Do we have leadership at the White House that is, clarifying or putting forward in a clear way, concise way, how the United States is addressing these issues? How are we protecting our soil in Egypt? And I don't think there's an answer coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania.
I mean, they've attacked the consulate in Benghazi as well, by the way. I mean, they're attacking two pieces of sovereign U.S. territory. Shouldn't the I mean, look, I know it's September 11th, and maybe they're saying that we're not going to say anything today because it could be viewed as political. But I think on anything, the fact that our embassies are being attacked on September 11th, the administration should be out there and they should be absolutely decrying this. The State Department comment is really ridiculous.
They absolutely should be. Of course. I think I agree with Amy, though, that people are not going to blame Barack Obama for this unrest. They might get the sense that, wow, things aren't as rosy as we thought they were a few months ago. If in November, Egypt, Cairo is on fire, and, there are protests in Libya and Syria is still a mess, maybe they'll get the sense that things aren't as good. But I don't think they're going to put these pieces together and blame Obama for this unrest, even though he's certainly had a hand in some of it.
And that's because what drives the president's foreign policy is political expediency. Everything is sort of tested ahead of time. The president's State of the Union, or not State of the Union, his convention speech was tested ahead of time. What's going to play best in the polls, not what's the best thing for the United States to do necessarily.
And polls show that Americans do not want more military adventurism in the Middle East.
That's why it's a correct political calculation, because I'll tell you something. I was just at an hour full of radio that we talked about nothing but foreign policy, and the answer to your question is, what is the Obama doctrine? It will sound something like this. It's about multilateralism versus unilateralism. It's about surgical strikes versus boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Case by case.
And right now, that answer plays better with the American people than doing something blunt.
Than having a philosophy.
But talking about perceptions of weakness, talking about, the speech in Cairo in 2009 and Obama apologizing to the whole world, that doesn't seem to have a lot of teeth with people until your embassies are being burned and your State Department is saying, well, we shouldn't be giving offense to people. I mean, I think that you're seeing the beginnings of what could be considered a change in how a lot of these crown jewels of Obama's foreign policy, Libya, we didn't do much in Egypt, but they're talking about the Arab Spring as though it's something that the Obama administration has handled well. That case is going to be more difficult to make, I think, coming up very soon. The question is, if it's in time to actually affect the election.
The one area where I think Mitt Romney does have an advantage is on Israel. And Anthony and I were talking before the show, that whole debacle at the Democratic National Convention of Jerusalem being the capital of Israel and the booing and the voting and so forth, that seems to be the one clear place where Mitt Romney can differentiate himself from the current commander-in-chief.
The question is, does it translate into electoral votes?
Right.
Like, can it swing Florida or not? Because otherwise, that may matter, but it doesn't change who wins the election.
I think the best he can do